Hi, this is Adolf here, and I'm a senior colorist. So many clients come to me asking, inquiring about short films. The most important concern they have is how do I make my images look cinematic? How do I make my short film look cinematic? This is a question which I often get by short filmmakers for indie filmmakers. So my answer to them in always is there are certain aspects that you need to follow in production, and there are certain aspects that you need to follow in post production, and they are a frame rate, exposure, grain, motion blur, depth of field, camera tools, color, dynamic range, sensor size, aspect ratio, resolution, codecs, and lenses. And of course, you have to do a cinematic post production, but it is not just applying a LUT or a look. These are the factors you must take care very carefully. And let me briefly tell you what you need to do in your short film to get that cinematic look or come close to that cinematic look. It is not just printing a film LUT and you don't get like that. There are things you need to follow in production, and there are things that you need to follow in post production. So I have to given the list. Now let me briefly talk about them. The first thing I would say when you're shooting a short film, do not think you're shooting a short film or an indie film. Do not think you are shooting a low budget film and you have low budget equipment or low budget camera. No, do not think like that. Think as if you're shooting a feature film. Think as if you're shooting a full length feature film, and enroll all the crew who have been shooting a feature film. So the first aspect starts with frame rate. It has to be at 24 frames per second to get that cinematic look. Apart from 24 frames per second, it has to be progressive. Do not shoot on interlace mode. You should be always recording using the full manual mode, and it is better if you record at the camera specified ISO. Try to use the native ISO of the camera or the lowest possible ISO or the gain setting. Always observe the 180-degree shutter rule. During moment of intense action, you can consider a 45-degree shutter instead of 180-degree shutter. Use the aperture, use the iris in conjunction with the ND filters to get a depth of field and exposure of your choice. You should also be doing a custom white balance for every lighting change. Try using as many exposure tools as you can on set. Try using histogram, waveform, zebra, false color, and everything at your disposal. They really make a difference in post. Always use focus peaking to help set focus for a shot. Consider the dynamic range of the camera that you're working on. Go and do some research and consider the dynamic ranges. It's going to help you to achieve that cinematic look. Consider using lighting and reflectors to even up the lighting between internal and the external scenes. Develop a personal understanding of what is the perfect level of overexposure and in what circumstances. You should also be trying to use a sensor that matches in size the sensor of 35 camera. It gives you a fantastic, lovely depth of field. Aspect ratio is another valuable tool at your disposal. Consider using it stylistically and make the best use of it. You can frame the shots using the on-screen guides. And if you shoot with the highest resolution of your camera, you can play with the aspect ratio. You can do a pan and scan later in the post. You can also do a digital zoom or a DVE or any other camera moment, or you give a camera a shake, or you can play with it. You have a lot of range to play with, and you should always be considering the correct lens for the correct shot type. There is a huge difference between a zoom and a prime lens, and I would rather recommend you should have a small collection, and I would recommend use different lens for different scenes which are required. So what makes a film look like a film? It is the beautiful motion blur, it is the vividness of the contrast range, it is the amazing rendition of colors, amazing control over depth of field and focus. I'm going to talk about it later in the next video about treating your indie film or short film and making it look cinematic. Thank you so much.